11 months working overseas, waking up before sunrise in a country that never quite felt like mine, saving every extra dollar, telling myself it would all be worth it when I came home. I imagined the moment constantly, pulling into my driveway, the familiar oak tree swaying in the front yard, the pale gray walls of my house glowing in the afternoon light. My house. The place I bought after a decade of grinding 70-hour weeks. The place that cost me $850,000 and every ounce of discipline I had. It was supposed to be my security, my future, my proof that I had made it. Instead, when I turned onto my street, I felt my stomach drop. The oak tree was gone. The gray walls were now a bold navy blue. The porch railing had been replaced. A black SUV I didn't recognize sat in the driveway. I thought I had the wrong address. I checked my phone. Same street, same number. I got out of the car slowly, my heart hammering. Maybe my brother had decided to renovate while I was gone. I had given him access to the house to keep an eye on it. He was the only family I trusted enough to do that. He had been struggling financially, and I figured letting him stay there temporarily would help him get back on his feet. I walked up to the front door and knocked. A woman I had never seen before opened it. Yes, she asked, polite but cautious. Hi, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I think there's been some mistake. I own this house. Her expression shifted from confusion to concern. We bought this house 3 months ago. The words felt like they were spoken underwater. You what? We bought it, she repeated gently. Through a realtor. Closed in June. Closed. In June, I was halfway across the world, working double shifts. I think you're mistaken, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. I never put this house up for sale. She hesitated, then said, my husband handled most of it, but everything was legal. We have the deed. The deed. My knees felt weak. I thanked her mechanically and walked back to my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my phone. I called my brother. He answered on the third ring, casual as ever. Hey, welcome back. You land already? I'm standing in front of my house, I said. Why is there a navy SUV in my driveway? There was a pause. A small one. Just enough to notice. Oh, he said. Oh, I repeated. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. I cashed out, he said. The words didn't register at first. What does that mean? It means I sold it, he replied, like he was explaining basic math. You weren't using it. Market was hot. Figured why let it sit there. I couldn't breathe. You sold my house. Technically, he said, his tone turning defensive, I had power of attorney. You signed it before you left, remember? So I could handle any necessary matters. I handled one. My mind raced back. I had signed paperwork at his suggestion, something he said would make it easier if repairs or emergencies came up while I was gone. I hadn't read it closely. He was my brother. I trusted you, I whispered. And you should thank me, he shot back. I got a great price. After fees and everything, cleared just over 800. Not bad. Where is the money? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Another pause. Well, he said slowly, I had some debts. The world tilted. How much? I demanded. Most of it, he admitted. Look, I invested some too. It's not gone. It's tied up. Tied up, I repeated. That house was everything I had. You're being dramatic, he snapped. You were overseas making bank. You'll recover. Recover. I hung up. For a few minutes, I just sat there in my car, staring at the house that used to be mine. A child's bicycle lay on the lawn. Wind chimes tinkled softly on the porch. Someone else's life was unfolding inside the walls I had painted, the kitchen I had remodeled with my own hands. And my brother had laughed. I didn't cry. Not then. The shock was too thick. Instead, I drove straight to a lawyer's office the next morning. The first question she asked was simple. Did you knowingly grant him power of attorney? Yes, I said, but not to sell my house. She nodded. It depends on how the document was written. When she pulled up the scanned copy, my stomach dropped again. The language was broad, painfully broad. It gave him authority to manage, sell, transfer, or otherwise dispose of assets in my name. I had signed it without reading. Can we reverse it? I asked. If he acted within the authority granted, she said carefully, and the buyers purchased in good faith, it will be very difficult. Very difficult. Lawyer language for almost impossible. What about the money? I pressed. If he misused the proceeds for personal gain beyond what you authorized, you may have a civil case against him. A civil case. Against my own brother. That night, I met him in person. He showed up late, wearing a new watch I had never seen before. Designer. Flashy. You look stressed, he said as he slid into the booth across from me. You stole from me, I replied flatly. He rolled his eyes. I didn't steal. I used legal authority you gave me. You sold my home without my consent. You gave consent when you signed that paper. His calmness was infuriating. Where is the money? I asked again. I told you. Debts. Investments. I'll pay you back. When? Relax. It's not like you're homeless. I almost laughed at the absurdity. I am homeless. He shrugged. You make good money. Rent somewhere. In that moment, something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not sadness. Clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't desperation. This was entitlement. He believed he deserved what I had built. I'm suing you, I said. He blinked, surprised. You wouldn't. Watch me. The months that followed were brutal. Court filings, bank statements, forensic accountants tracing where the money went. Turns out, investments meant risky day trading and a failing restaurant venture with a friend. The debts, credit cards, gambling losses, personal loans. He hadn't just sold my house. He had gambled my future. Friends and extended family took sides. Some said, he's your brother. Others whispered that I must have done something to provoke it, as if betrayal required justification. But the facts were clear. He had liquidated my largest asset and funneled the majority into his own accounts. The lawsuit dragged on for nearly a year. In court, he tried to paint himself as a caretaker making strategic financial decisions on my behalf. He argued that selling the property during a market peak was smart. That reinvesting the funds would grow the portfolio. The judge wasn't impressed. Text messages surfaced. Ones where he bragged to a friend, my brother's place just became my bailout. Another where he joked, he won't even notice till he's back. He had known exactly what he was doing. When the ruling finally came, it was both vindicating and sobering. The sale of the house stood. The new owners kept it. They had purchased legally and in good faith. But my brother was found to have breached his fiduciary duty. He was ordered to repay the majority of the proceeds, plus damages. On paper, I won. In reality, collecting the money was another battle. His investments had failed. The restaurant had closed. The trading account was nearly empty. You can't squeeze water from a stone. He declared bankruptcy within 6 months. I won a judgment, not my house. For a long time, I replayed everything in my head. The document I signed, the trust I gave so freely, the laugh on the phone. But here's what no one tells you about betrayal. It doesn't just break your heart. It recalibrates your vision. I stopped assuming shared blood meant shared values. I stopped confusing access with loyalty. And I started rebuilding. Not recklessly, not angrily, strategically. I moved into a modest apartment. I kept working. I diversified my savings instead of tying everything to one property. I learned the language of contracts. I read every clause, twice. 3 years later, I bought another home. Smaller, simpler, entirely under my control. When I stood in that new doorway for the first time, keys in hand, I didn't feel the same naive pride I had before. I felt something better. Resilience. My brother and I don't speak now. Not because of the money, though that wound runs deep. We don't speak because trust, once shattered that completely, doesn't regenerate. People ask if I regret suing him. No, because sometimes the cost of staying silent is greater than the cost of confrontation. If there's anything to take from my story, it's this: protect what you build. Not just with locks and alarms, but with knowledge. Read what you sign, question what feels off, and never assume someone won't cross a line simply because you wouldn't. I went abroad to grow my future. I came home to find it sold. But I learned that a house, even one worth $850,000, is not the same as a foundation. A foundation is what remains when everything else is stripped away. And mine, though shaken, was never for sale. When people hear the first part of my story, they usually focus on the shock, the moment I stood outside my own house and realized it no longer belonged to me. They focus on the betrayal, the lawsuit, the courtroom drama. But what they don't see is what came after the judgment. They don't see the quiet, grinding, unglamorous aftermath. That's where the real story begins. The court ruled in my favor. On paper, it looked like justice. My brother was ordered to repay most of the money he took, plus damages. The judge made it clear, he had abused the authority I gave him. He had breached his fiduciary duty. He had acted in bad faith. I remember walking out of that courtroom feeling lighter. Not happy, not triumphant, just validated. The legal system had confirmed what I already knew. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't being dramatic, like he had said. He had wronged me, but validation doesn't pay rent. Within months of the ruling, reality hit. He didn't have the money. The investments were gone. The restaurant he'd poured cash into had collapsed. His trading account had been wiped out by risky bets he never fully understood. Creditors were circling him from every direction. Then came the final blow. He filed for bankruptcy. When I got the notice, I stared at it for a long time. Bankruptcy. A legal reset button. A shield that would protect him from most of the debt he owed, including a significant portion of what he owed me. It felt like being robbed twice. First, he sold my home. Then, he legally minimized the consequences. I won a judgment, but I didn't get my house back. I didn't get my money back. What I got was a framed piece of paper and a painful education. For weeks after the bankruptcy filing, I barely slept. Not because I was afraid of being broke, I still had my income. I had rebuilt some savings. What kept me awake was the psychological weight of it all. How did I miss the signs? Looking back, they were there. He always had a big opportunity around the corner. Always a reason why his current situation wasn't his fault. The job that didn't appreciate him. The partner who let him down. The system that was rigged. I used to interpret that as ambition mixed with bad luck. Now I see it as something else. Chronic avoidance of responsibility. When I let him stay in my house while I was abroad, I told myself I was being supportive. He was family. Family helps family. That's what we're taught. But support without boundaries isn't kindness. It's permission. The hardest part wasn't cutting financial ties. It was confronting the emotional reality. This wasn't a stranger who scammed me. This wasn't some faceless con artist. This was the kid I shared a bedroom with growing up. The one I defended in school fights. The one I loaned money to, again and again, because I believed, next time, would be different. When the bankruptcy proceedings began, we had to sit in the same room again. Different courtroom, different judge, same tension. He wouldn't look at me. For the first time, he didn't have jokes. He didn't have sarcasm. He didn't have that casual shrug. He looked smaller. I expected to feel satisfaction seeing him cornered. Instead, I felt something more complicated. Grief. Not for the money, for the relationship we used to have, or maybe the one I imagined we had. At one point, his lawyer tried to argue that my lawsuit had pushed him into bankruptcy. That if I had handled things within the family, he wouldn't be in this position. I almost laughed out loud. Within the family, he sold my home without telling me. He spent the money. He laughed about it, and I was supposed to protect him from consequences. That moment clarified something permanently for me. Accountability feels like cruelty to people who rely on your silence. After the bankruptcy restructuring, it became clear I would recover only a fraction of what was owed over many years, if at all. Small, court-ordered payments. Nothing close to the original amount. I had a choice. I could let bitterness consume me. Or I could treat the loss as tuition. Expensive tuition. $850,000 worth of life education. I chose the second path, not because I'm noble, but because bitterness is heavy. And I was tired of carrying heavy things. The first thing I did was rebuild my financial structure from scratch. Before, most of my net worth had been tied up in that one property. It felt safe, tangible, solid. Real estate had always seemed like the ultimate symbol of stability. But I had learned a brutal truth: concentration equals vulnerability. Now, I diversified everything. Emergency fund in a separate institution. Investments spread across different asset classes. Clear legal documentation for every account. Updated will. Explicit limitations in any future power of attorney documents, if I ever granted one again. I didn't just rebuild money. I rebuilt systems. Then I rebuilt myself. For a long time, I carried shame. Not because I did something wrong legally, but because I felt foolish. I pride myself on being careful, analytical, disciplined. Yet I had signed a document without reading it thoroughly. Why? Because I trusted him. Trust isn't stupidity, but blind trust can be. I started therapy 6 months after the bankruptcy finalized. Not because I was falling apart, but because I didn't want this experience to harden me into someone unrecognizable. In one session, my therapist asked a question that stuck with me. If this had been a business partner instead of your brother, what would you have done differently? The answer came immediately. I would have read every word of the contract. I would have limited authority. I would have required dual signatures for asset sales. I would have monitored accounts. So why, she asked gently, does family deserve less structure than business? That question rewired something in my brain. We tend to treat boundaries as a sign of distrust. In reality, boundaries are a form of clarity. They define expectations. They prevent misunderstandings. They protect relationships from unnecessary strain. If I had set clearer boundaries, maybe he wouldn't have had the opportunity, or the temptation, to do what he did. Or maybe he would have tried anyway. But at least the door wouldn't have been wide open. About 2 years after losing the house, I drove by it again. I hadn't planned to. I was in the area for work, and muscle memory guided my turn. The navy paint was still there. The oak tree was replaced by a smaller maple. There were flower beds along the walkway I never planted. A basketball hoop stood near the garage. It looked alive. For a split second, an old ache surfaced. That used to be mine. Then something unexpected happened. I didn't feel anger. I felt release. That house had become a symbol of betrayal in my mind. But standing there, I realized it was just wood, brick, and drywall. The meaning I attached to it was mine, not inherent. Losing it didn't erase my work ethic. It didn't erase my ability to earn. It didn't erase my discipline. It exposed a weakness in my judgment. And weaknesses can be strengthened. 3 years after the lawsuit, I bought another home. This time, I moved differently. I involved a financial advisor and a real estate attorney from day one. Every document was reviewed line by line. Every clause questioned. Every scenario stress tested. When I signed the final paperwork, I didn't feel the explosive pride I felt with the first house. I felt calm. Calm is underrated. Calm means the decision wasn't fueled by ego. It was built on experience. My brother reached out once, about a year after the bankruptcy was finalized. A short message: I know I messed up. I was desperate. I hope one day you can forgive me. I stared at that message for a long time. Forgiveness is complicated. It doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean access. It doesn't mean pretending the damage didn't happen. I replied with something simple: I hope you get your life together. That was it. No anger. No invitation. Just distance. People sometimes ask if I'd ever trust him again. Trust isn't a light switch. It's more like a bridge. And that bridge wasn't cracked, it collapsed. Rebuilding it would require more than words. It would require years of consistent behavior, accountability, humility. Not apologies typed in a moment of regret. And I'm no longer responsible for managing his growth. Here's the truth most people won't say out loud: sometimes the lesson isn't about money. It's about identity. For a long time, I saw myself as the responsible one. The fixer. The stable brother. The one who would always step in. That identity made me vulnerable to exploitation because it made me predictable. Now, I still help people. But I don't rescue them. There's a difference. Rescuing often robs people of the consequences that create change. Helping supports growth without absorbing responsibility for someone else's choices. If you're watching this and you've built something, whether it's a business, a home, a savings account, or even just peace in your life, protect it. Not with paranoia, with wisdom. Read what you sign. Understand what authority you grant. Separate love from legal access. And never assume someone won't cross a line simply because you wouldn't. The day I came home and found my $850,000 house sold, I thought my foundation had been ripped away. But foundations aren't made of property. They're made of character. And character is forged in moments exactly like that. I lost a house. I lost money. I lost a version of my brother I wanted to believe in. But I gained discernment. I gained boundaries. I gained resilience that can't be liquidated by someone else's bad decisions. And that, unlike real estate, is something no one can sell out from under me.